we'll start with this. My previous video, we talked about how Naoya Inoue, ESPN's #2 pound-for-pound boxer, has agreed to a title bout with Paul Butler, set to go down later on this year. This will be an undisputed bantamweight title fight. The first time in over 50 years the bantamweight division has had an undisputed champion, and the first time in the four-belt era the division sees an undisputed champion crowned. This is a monumental achievement for Naoya Inoue.
Even if Paul Butler, as a fighter, as a champion, seems like cannon fodder for Naoya Inoue,
Even if the bookies will have Naoya Inoue the considerable favorite to win, there is still virtue in what Naoya Inoue is doing. It's not a coincidence.
it's not for no reason that Naoya Inoue is one of the most recognizable faces and one of the most recognizable fighters anywhere at or around these weights. More recognizable than Fulton, America's own unified super bantamweight champion. More recognizable than MJ Akhmadaliev, the unified super bantamweight champion of Uzbekistan. Naoya Inoue is more recognizable at bantamweight than these fighters are at super bantamweight and just about any and every other fighter at his own weight. It's not a coincidence. It's not for no reason that this guy's so popular. Relatively speaking, as in the past, these lower weights, they didn't get much attention, especially in America.
Divisions like the flyweight division, the super flyweight division, the bantamweight division, and super bantamweight, in the past, most Americans, they didn't take in these fights. They didn't watch these fighters. Whereas these days, ESPN Plus thought enough of this situation that they started showing Naoya Inoue's fights. And I have no doubts
They're going to show this fight in December once it all goes down.
I think most people will agree that Paul Butler, God bless him, he's no match for Naoya Inoue. But then why would a fight like this get this much attention if he's no match for his adversary, his quarry, Naoya Inoue? Well, it's the chance for Naoya Inoue to make history. History in a way that hasn't been made in approximately 50 years.
But that's not all. It's not just the chance to make history. If he obtains the final belt, the WBO title,
You know what happens then? He can then move up in weight as the WBO's mandatory challenger at super bantamweight, the same way Terence Crawford did when he became an undisputed champion at 140 pounds, moved up in weight, and became the mandatory challenger for Jeff Hearn. Alexander Usyk did the same thing when he moved up from cruiserweight to heavyweight after having become the cruiserweight division's undisputed champion. He became the mandatory challenger instantaneously for Anthony Joshua's WBO title. That same privilege awaits Naoya Inoue if he splatters Paul Butler the same way we all think he's gonna splatter Paul Butler.
he's going to knock that fucking guy out.
Who's the WBO champion at 122 pounds? Fulton's a WBO champion at 122 pounds. Fulton, who's spent a lot of time now calling out Naoya Inoue, talking about him and talking about that fight. Early next year, he may yet get the chance to take on Naoya Inoue, because if Naoya is successful against Paul Butler, he will then have the same privilege that Terence Crawford had, that Alexander Usyk had. He will have that privilege, the privilege to move up in weight and take on that division's WBO champion as his mandatory challenger.
If he so chooses, yeah, he can do that.
He can fight him straight away. This year, Fulton already satisfied his joint mandatory challenger and Daniel Roman, former unified super bantamweight champion Daniel Roman. So at this time, Fulton doesn't have any mandatories outstanding. No mandatories due. But next year, that's quite another matter.
This move to shoot for undisputed at bantamweight ain't just about legacy, and it's not just about making history. It's about functionality.
The function of picking up the last puzzle piece at bantamweight, the WBO title, will so empower Naoya Inoue to move up in weight with the leverage of being Fulton's mandatory challenger, thus forcing him to come to the table. Not saying that he has to be forced, but in any event, that would be the situation. Stefan would have to oblige him, as he would be Stefan's mandatory challenger. And that helps to deal with the politics of the situation, the fact that Fulton is a PBC fighter, and in this part of the world, Naoya Inoue is a top-ranked fighter.
This is one of the few ways you can force both boys to come to the table and negotiate a deal.
Given Fulton's candor and his alleged enthusiasm towards facing Naoya Inoue, one would think that you don't have to force the guy to come to the
the table in order to defend his titles. Though in the event that you do, Naoya Inoue, if he picks up that WBO title and he moves up in weight, and he is Stefan's mandatory challenger as a result, well, that imposes that situation on Stefan to where he either has to deal with this guy or give him his belt.
It would have been nice if Stefan could have become this division's undisputed champion before this year is out, but there are politics tacked onto that situation as well.
Stefan Fulton, unified champion. Stefan Fulton is with the PBC. MJ Akhmadaliev is with Matchroom. And that's a situation unto itself. Tack on the fact that MJ Akhmadaliev is out for the rest of the year because reportedly he hurt his hand in his last fight.
Like I said, it would have been nice to see an undisputed champion crowned at super bantamweight.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but this might. There's a very good chance that Naoya Inoue is going to knock out Paul Butler. When he does, and he becomes this division's undisputed champion, he will be awarded the privilege of moving up in weight as Stefan Fulton's mandatory challenger by way of the WBO. And as we all know, Bob Arum has always had a way with the WBO. And in this part of the world, Bob Arum promotes Naoya Inoue.
Just the foreshadowing of things to come.
In men's featherweight news, ahead of his upcoming UK showdown with Lee Wood, Mauricio Lara on Lee Wood, he's targeting Josh Warrington for revenge, and he's labeling him a dirty fighter and a cheat. Their 20,000 sellout Headingley rematch ended after just 2 rounds due to a cut on the left eye of Lara after an accidental clash of heads, which led to the contest ending in a technical draw. In his most recent performance, the 24-year-old Mexican viciously knocked out Emilio Sanchez in 3 rounds on the Chocolatito versus Martinez undercard, showing his destructive punching power. Mauricio Lara explained to No Smoke Boxing that he has been patiently waiting for another big chance after the disappointing end to the Warrington rematch, and on September 24, he will make the most of the opportunity presented to him. Lara has no problem facing Wood in the UK where he feels at home, and is glad to be back in the country where he got his breakthrough moment.
I don't think Mauricio Lara is going to get the chance to share the ring with Josh Warrington again.
Just not sure that happens. Currently, Josh Warrington is under orders to face the winner of Lopez versus Vargas, and I get the sense that Lopez might end up winning that fight, and I get the sense that Josh Warrington, he could very well end up losing his IBF title to Lopez.
I don't know, maybe he retires after that.
I don't know for sure that that's how this cookie is going to crumble, but on the face of it, that's what I see. Thus, I don't get the sense that Mauricio Lara will get the chance to face Josh Warrington for a 3rd time. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Currently, Mauricio Lara is set to take on Lee Wood, the WBA's regular champion at featherweight. If Mauricio Lara wins that fight, he becomes the WBA regular champion and the mandatory challenger for the winner of the proposed Leo Santa Cruz versus Ray Vargas fight, their unification match, which is an interesting situation unto itself.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, because first Mauricio Lara has to beat Lee Wood.
Mauricio Lara thinks that Josh Warrington is a dirty fighter because there were a lot of head clashes in that second fight.
We don't know that those clashes of heads were intentional, or if it doesn't just boil down to styles, that both Mauricio Lara and Josh Warrington, they've got the same sweet spot. They're both mid-range to inside fighters.
2 fighters that fight within close quarters are bound to clash heads because they fight within close proximity of the other man. They're not outside fighters, keeping the guy at arm's length.
So it's possible those head clashes weren't on purpose.
But it's also possible, it's just as possible that they were. That Josh Warrington knew what he was doing, and he knew how to disguise it, because he knew this time, at least this time in that second fight, he knew what he was dealing with. He knew Mauricio Lara was a hard-punching guy who trounced him before, and he was looking for any way to inflict damage upon him
to prevent himself from getting trounced again. Trounced by Mauricio Lara.
That was last year, and some time has passed. Josh Warrington this year saw himself become a 2-time featherweight champion when he took on Kiko Martinez for the red belt. He once threw in the air, chucked, ended up fighting Mauricio Lara, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Josh Warrington vacated it, Kid Galahad picked it up,
At which point, Kid Galahad subsequently lost it to Kiko Martinez, who then lost it to Josh Warrington.
The rest, as they say, is history.
And I don't know with any certainty that Mauricio Lara will be once again granted the chance to share the ring with Josh Warrington. Not now that he's a champion, and not now that he's under orders. He's got Leigh Wood in front of him. Leigh Wood, different fighter than Josh Warrington. Josh Warrington, he's not a power guy, but he's a volume guy. He throws punches in bunches, and he can do a bit of boxing when the situation calls for it. Whereas Leigh Wood, Lee's a more heavy-handed guy.
Leigh Wood punches hard.
Harder, at least, than Josh Warrington, but he doesn't have Josh's work rate. He's not as prolific a puncher as Josh Warrington. And I'd say that Leigh Wood's sweet spot is a little different than Josh Warrington's. Josh is a mid-range to inside guy. Leigh seems to throw his best punches from the outside coming in. His best punches seem to be his straight punches. Against Mauricio Lara, it doesn't behoove Leigh Wood to go blow for blow with that guy. He can't let this turn into a shootout, as he might quickly find out that Mauricio Lara's got a better beard and brought bigger guns to the gun show. No, he's got to box this guy and look to set up the counter.
If you don't know nothing else, you know that Mauricio Lara is aggressive, and he likes to throw, and he swings wide.
So you don't just engage a guy like this. You don't just engage Mauricio Lara lest you make yourself subject to his power, when what you should be doing is trying to work around it and exploiting his limitations as a boxer, because he is limited. He is a limited boxer, albeit a hard punching boxer. He's not a streamlined, nuanced fighter.
This guy swings wide, so what you've got to do is get under and around those shots and bring over the counters.
Make him miss and make him pay. That's what they say. A good counter shot, even from a guy who's not necessarily the most heavy-handed guy, can garner respect. And the saving grace for Leigh Wood is he actually does have some power of his own. So that power, coupled with a counter shot, if he can deliver one, perhaps it can buy him some time, because this guy's dangerous. And what Leigh Wood's got to do is box him.
That's what he's got to do. You box the fighter and fight the boxer.
Don't give him what he wants. If what this guy wants is a brawl, you keep it a boxing match. And the same is true in reverse, depending on the situation. What Leigh Wood's got to do here is outwit Mauricio Lara, because he may falter trying to outmuscle him. He's got to out-hustle him.
And in September, we'll find out if he can. We'll find out how this story ends.
And finally, in men's heavyweight news, Eddie Hearn chimed in on a potential Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk fight, saying it's actually not a very good fight to watch. I think they're going to negate each other a lot with movement. Fury doesn't want to fight Usyk, but he may have to because the money might be so big. I'd favor Usyk. And
it's a good fight.
I don't think Eddie Hearn is being completely honest here about the aesthetic of this match and whether or not it would be an appealing fight to watch. Alexander Usyk's not a power guy, so Tyson Fury wouldn't be looking to offset his power by moving lateral or boxing off the back foot. Quite the opposite. Most people are expecting Tyson Fury, given his sheer size, to attempt to mow Alexander Usyk down, because Alexander Usyk is the naturally smaller fighter, and even as a cruiserweight, he was never a big puncher, never a concussive puncher.
Strategy's always different. It changes fight by fight.
You know, the way that Tyson Fury chose to fight Deontay Wilder, smothering him and forcing him onto his back foot in spite of Deontay Wilder being a concussive puncher. He's a concussive puncher that needs to set his feet and get full extension on that arm. So if you force him back and smother him at the same time, that will neutralize his power. With Dillian Whyte, it was a little different. Dillian Whyte is actually better in the pocket than Deontay Wilder, thus Tyson Fury chose to box off the back foot and walk him into shots, walk him into punches.
He didn't come forward on Dillian Whyte because Dillian Whyte wants to crowd you. He wants to be in the pocket to work your body.
Thus, Tyson Fury didn't make himself available for Dillian Whyte's body punches. He fought on the fly, fought on the move, walked him into shots, wore him down, took him out with an uppercut, because he knew if he makes himself a stationary target and he stops moving, it's that much easier for Dillian to get to him. The strategy changes. Fight by fight, depending on who you're fighting. With Alexander Usyk, well, it's a little trickier.
Most people feel, given Tyson Fury's size advantage, he would choose to mow Alexander Usyk down.
Tyson Fury's got a good beard. We all know that. And he's shown great powers of recovery, coupled with his height advantage and his reach advantage, his weight advantage. He'd likely try to impose his size on Alexander Usyk, crowd him, fluster him, in order to prevent him from keeping this a boxing match. And it would be up to Alexander Usyk and those fancy feet of his.
I mean, this is where it gets tricky. Tyson Fury's approach might very well be a straightforward approach.
And if the fight fans are expecting that, in all likelihood, Alexander Usyk is expecting that. He's expecting a big guy who's going to try to mow him down, but he wouldn't be in unfamiliar territory if that's the case, because that's what he had to deal with in Joe Joyce way back when in the World Series of Boxing, that semi-pro tournament.
That was a David and Goliath situation. So is this.
Eerily semblant of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Russia greatly dwarfed dwarfing the Ukraine in terms of size and scale, the same way that Tyson Fury greatly dwarfs Alexander Usyk in terms of size.
He'd be looking to invade the pocket.
Same way Russia invaded the Ukraine. I'm sure that Alexander Usyk is aware of this.
Drawing so much inspiration from the war. I'm sure he's aware of that parallel.
Him being a Ukrainian ambassador to the world, not just the world of boxing, but the world overall, to display Ukrainian resilience and excellence. I'm sure he's aware that there's a parallel in there.
We've talked about Tyson Fury's height advantage, his reach advantage, his durability, his powers of recovery.
His punching power. Tyson Fury would have the edge in power in this thing overall, and he'd be looking to inflict a lot of damage with that power as he crowds the much smaller Alexander Usyk. So how could Alexander hope to work around it? Well, he's worked around big guy with a lot of power before. In Joe Joyce, though I will admit, Joe Joyce is a lot slower than Tyson Fury, and he was a lot less experienced than Tyson Fury is now when he faced Alexander Usyk then, though I will reiterate, Alexander's not in unfamiliar territory. It's his feet that have got to win him this fight.
He overcame the size of Joe Joyce, overcame the size of Anthony Joshua more recently on 2 consecutive occasions.
Can Alexander overcome the sheer size and punching power of Tyson Fury? Well, his feet will be rudimentary in this endeavor, turning Tyson Fury and cutting angles. Alexander Usyk being a southpaw,
Well, it creates a trickier situation than if he were an orthodox fighter.
and I would wager that in terms of speed, who's got the faster hands and the faster feet? Who really is more athletic than the other guy? I'd wager that Alexander Usyk is, in fact, more athletic than Tyson Fury, though there is a lot of size there to have to work around.
And I don't think Alexander can knock this guy out. This guy's been dropped before, but he always picks himself back up. Alexander,
He's never been a power puncher, not as a cruiserweight and certainly not now as a heavyweight. He has to outwit and outmaneuver Tyson Fury in order to secure the W, secure the victory.
strange as this might sound, he's got to hit that guy with punches he don't see.
And because he's got the edge, foot speed and hand speed, Alexander can put a sequence of punches together faster than Tyson Fury can. The question is, can he do that for 12 rounds?
Well, there's only one way to find out.